or two. Usually during this period, I do a live stream YouTube, so in case you are absent, like I have 4 people absent today, and if you need to check out what we did, you can always go to my YouTube channel, or I also usually put it on Canvas as well. But again, so your 2 questions about like what we got going on in this class, you can ask about that. Anything tech related. For those of you who still don't have iPads, I apologize. I don't know why we can't get that part figured out. And I have it set up to where it doesn't show you guys too, because I know, you want to respect your guys' privacy. So I might hear you, but they won't see the face who's actually saying it. Just a reminder, tonight is back to school, so if you guys want to come the way it works, and you don't even have to come, you can just say, hey mom, dad, go do this thing. That's fine too. And I understand some parents work, so if you can't, if they can't make it, that's fine. You can always contact, if they have questions, they can email me, they can shoot me a remind message, whatever is easiest for you. Mostly I'm just going to talk about stuff you basically already know, stuff that's covered in the syllabus. It's most, honestly, back to school is for parents who want to come ask questions. So some parents like to do it in person, but if they can't do it in person, again, they know how to reach me, or you know how they can reach me. Anybody need more time? We good? All right, so you guys are a little more vocal. I mean, albeit not much. It's still the beginning of the year, so you guys are still warming up a little bit. So, but does anybody want to volunteer before I call in people about questions that you guys have? Yeah. No, I prefer to do no fun. So that's going to be my policy for the entire year. So unfortunately, you're going to have to get used to that. So no fun. So good question though. Yes.
We're going to get like any breaks.
Any what?
Like breaks.
I mean, yes, no. I mean, it's only an hour-long class, but I mean, like during block schedules, like I'll sometimes give you like a couple minutes here and there. But I mean, we usually have a lot of stuff to do, but I will try to make it to where if you guys need to like stretch or whatever, that we can do that. But it's not gonna be like a long extended thing. So yeah.
Are there going to be any projects, and if so, how many are there going to be?
Most of my assignments are either writing assignments or project assignments. So that's, I mean, there's like a very few like quizzes here and there, like mostly like when we do some readings, but even then, not for every reading we do, but just sometimes I'll like have a quiz, but most of your assignments are going to be projects. So again, if you look back to that wall over there, that is something we'll do next semester. It's called the Literary Art Project, and it's basically you create art inspired by the book we're reading. So, and that's one of the projects. Now, we'll have other projects too. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I'm completely redoing a lot of my curriculum from last year because last year was online, and we had to really change how we did things. So, I'm still thinking about different assignments, and yes, hopefully some of the assignments will be fun, but also it depends on your attitude about it too. I mean, if you go in thinking everything's gonna suck, well, I can't help you, but I mean, I will try to get some assignments, and I will try to have more group assignments as well too. So yeah. Any other volunteered questions before I call in some people? When I call on you, I'm only gonna call on, you only have to give me one of your questions. You don't have to ask both questions, okay? All right, let's start this off, and this just kind of helps me get to know some of you better too by calling on you. Brandon, what's one of your questions?
I don't have any.
You have to have at least then you didn't do the warm-up. You got to do at least a question. I'll come back to you, but come up with one, okay? All right. Right next to you, Pedro.
Retakes on tests.
Okay, so like I said, we don't do very many tests, but for the most part, I will let you guys have retakes on tests if you like bomb them, If you get like lower than like a C, I'll let you retake it, right? You might have to do something else before you can take it to show, like, because here's what I don't want to do. You're supposed to read something. You take a quiz. You fail spectacularly on it. And then you want to retake it again. Well, if you retake it again, you still haven't read it, right? For some of you, and that's mostly why people fail, is because they don't read. So I won't let you retake it immediately. You'll have to do something to show that you've read it. But yes, you will be able to retake on the few times that we do quizzes. I would say probably at least 60 to 75% of your scores of your grade is going to come from either writing or project. So the test, it's not like math or science. The tests are going to be such a small fraction of your grade. It won't have a huge impact, but you still will be able to retake it. Let's see. She's not here. He's not here. He is here. Nathan.
I forgot my question already. I don't really have any though.
You should have it written down on your warm up.
I know I do, but I never have any questions though. I don't like to ask questions.
Well, that's not a good thing. You should always want to ask questions, or else, you can get kind of screwed over if you don't ask questions. Okay, again, I'm going to come back to you too. Try to come up with something though. Speaking of which, Brandon.
Wednesday is our first book. Or like, when are we going to read it?
Okay, that's a good question. This semester, we don't really read a lot of books. We mostly read short stories. The only things that we read that are a little longer this semester is we read a graphic novel, which honestly we knock out in like 2 days usually as far as reading, so it's obviously not very long. And then we also read a play called Medea, which is a little longer, but even then it's not that long. So most of our longer readings will come next semester. We'll read Julius Caesar, which I know some of you cringe when you guys hear Shakespeare, and I totally get it, but I will make sure to help you guys get through it because I know the language can be difficult. Then afterwards, after Shakespeare, we go to Lord of the Flies, which is our longest book. But believe me, after Shakespeare, you're like, oh my God, I could read this so much easier, and you guys will be so happy to be reading something in more contemporary English. And then after that, the last thing we read is a novella, which if you don't know what a novella is, it's basically a mini novel, and called Night. And again, so those are going to be the 3 books that we read, but they'll be mostly next semester. Let's see, Alex. Like during winter break?
Yeah.
I usually give an extra credit assignment if you want to, and like it gets applied to the next semester, so you start off with extra credit, but nothing that's like mandatory. Okay, Nathan?
Is the final draft due tonight?
Yes, even though you probably already knew the answer to that, thank you for at least asking. Yes, the final draft is due tonight, and in fact, now that you brought that up, I made a mistake. I put it in this week's module and forgot to publish it, so those of you who are trying to turn it in for extra credit last night couldn't. So what I did instead is I fixed it. You should be able to turn it in now. But if you turn it in during school today, and I don't mean necessarily during this period, but by 3:10 a day, you'll get extra credit. Because I still wanted you guys to have an opportunity to turn it in for extra credit, because it was my fault, not your guys'. But if you turn it in after school, so after 3:10, it'll be regular credit, and you guys will have till midnight. So after midnight, it'll turn to a 0. And then the whole late policy thing comes into play. But yeah, so thank you for asking that because yeah, that was something I needed to bring up with you. I'm just gonna do a couple more because again, these are good questions, Gianna.
My question was, I don't know if already said how many books.
Okay, yeah. Well, since I already answered that, I could at least answer something kind of different that's similar, like for how many short stories we're gonna do. We will be reading probably, so Metamorphosis, Medea, will be the first thing we're actually reading is, we're going to start reading today is 7 Floors. Then we're going to read something called Biafra, which is a story by an American writer, but she's like of Nigerian descent. And then we're going to be reading Harrison Bergeron, and then, so we're probably going to be reading like 7 or 8 short stories this semester. And some of them will be for like our first essay that we do. Medea is going to be for our second essay. And if nobody's asked this question, how many essays are we writing? we're writing 2 essays this semester, 3 next semester. So some teachers believe in quantity over quality. I'm the opposite. Some teachers, and if you think 2 is a lot, again, some teachers will give you like 1 every other week. So be thankful that I'm not one of those teachers, because I would rather us spend more time on an essay, both in the pre-writing, during writing, and the after writing. So like the revision part of it, I want to make sure that we get better at writing. And to me, personally, my personal belief as a teacher is that if you keep doing the same thing a bunch of times, but you're not doing a great job at it, I don't feel like you're going to actually get better. I feel like if you spend more time on something and take care and effort into something, you'll have a better chance of making it worthwhile. But yeah, so we'll be doing 2 essays this semester. We'll also be doing brief writes, which you probably have done in like your freshman year. They're like longer paragraphs, basically paragraph responses. So we'll be doing those as well. All right, one last person. Out here. Finally, okay. Kayla.
I was gonna ask how many essays were gonna, but you just asked me.
You should have another question. What's your other question? You guys should have 2 questions.
When will we read our first book?
Okay, again, first book, like I said, will be probably the graphic novel that we read this semester. It's a short graphic novel, but that's usually around October-ish, I would say. It's one of the last things we read before we write our essay, you know, so around then. But we'll mostly be reading short stories that range from 5 to 12 pages, roughly. Yeah.
Would this be the first essay out of the 2 essays we've read this semester?
Correct, the one in October. So we're not writing a full-on essay. We'll be doing a brief write before then, at least 1 or 2 brief writes before. But first full-on essay that's going to probably be about 3 pages will be in October. So, and I will make sure you guys are prepped for that. So don't like freak out. Yeah.
I feel like most people like enjoy more like our the books.
Which is my favorite.
Well, like in general, like everyone in the class like noticeable.
I would say probably like for this semester, I would say one of the favorites that we do is the graphic novel Metamorphosis, which a lot of people like. It's a graphic novel adaptation of an actual book. So basically, it was originally like a normal book, but one of the artists who I actually interview in my podcast that I'm going to share with you guys later. I interviewed the artist who he basically read the book and made it into a graphic novel version. And so usually people like that one a lot. So it's a lot of fun. I like teaching graphic novels. I would like to teach more graphic novels actually, but it's actually like an idea I've had for a class is to have a graphic novel class, but we'll see. We'll see if I can get that going. Any other questions before we go on? I'll go you and then you because you already asked one.
Are we doing presentations?
Yeah, we will be doing presentations. Actually, on the syllabus, one of the things that I mentioned was an app called Adobe Spark Video. Has anybody used that in here? So, especially for the first presentations, I will allow students to use that instead of getting up, because I know some people get uncomfortable getting up in front of people. But gradually, I will take that kind of crutch away, and you'll have to get up and present too. But yes, there will be presentations in here. And then I'll come back to you, okay?
So I try to turn in the final draft.
Right now?
Yeah, right now.
Okay.
And it just,
Does it say no submit?
it's just-
Okay, I will look at that, thank you. I will fix that while we're going through the next parts, but yes.
I was gonna ask, is there a group project?
There will be group projects, yeah, absolutely. Hold on a second, let me see if I can fix this really quick for you guys, the final draft. While I'm doing that, is there any other questions though, or want to make sure?
Will we get to a group or will it just be
Well, I let you guys for the most part pick your groups last Friday. It just sometimes I'll pick, sometimes it'll be your guys' choice. It'll just depend on the project, you know. Yeah, it definitely will change on project to project. I changed the dates, but I hadn't changed some of the other assignments. Okay. If you refresh it, it should work now. Sorry about that. Okay. So what we're going to be doing today is we are going to be starting our transformation unit. So that's what we're going to be talking about for honestly the next 2.5 months is that idea. But we're going to be talking about how it applies to other stories. Oh yeah, sorry. Club Rush is tomorrow. So if you guys are interested in Club Rush, like in joining any clubs, I know last year we technically had some clubs that like did run, some that didn't, but obviously with us starting our, what I keep referring to as our normal-ish year, we are going to have active clubs. I'm actually advisor for 3 different clubs. So yearbook, you're interested, didn't join the class, maybe you didn't finish your schedule, maybe you didn't want to commit to just being in the actual class. You can technically on Tuesdays after school, we do workshops if you're interested in it. Maybe you worked with Mr. Cheek or I forgot the new advisor's name at WAMS, but if you worked over there but want to do that over here, or maybe you are interested in joining the class later and you want to see how it runs beforehand, we'll be meeting on Tuesdays. The remind code for the club is SHSYBK Club. I'm the GSA, the Gay Straight Alliance advisor. I've been that advisor for 2 years now. So GSA is a place of inclusion. We want like as many people to be involved as possible. It's a place technically for LGBTQ, but for example, like you don't have to be gay to join it. I'm not gay, so I have a wife and you know, it's like, it's anybody can join. It's basically just an inclusive environment just for people to hang out, essentially. Feminist Club, again, same thing. Ironically, the last 2 advisors, myself and the previous advisor, have been men. But, you know, Feminist Club is anybody who supports women's rights and is willing to speak out on that front. So if you're interested in it, the remind code for that one is 20 Feminists. Oh yeah, and GSA is Sager-GSA. If you're interested in joining those clubs, you guys can join that. I'll have that information. We'll have tables during lunch too. So if you're interested in joining, please join. And then what's due tonight again? Is that the question again? Final draft of your essays. Excellent. Yes. So again, regular credit after school, extra credit before school ends. So yes, the final draft is due tonight. So please make sure that you guys get that done. It is 40 points. The rough draft was 30 points. So altogether, this thing's worth about 70 plus the revision. So like basically like 85 points, I think. So it's a lot. Remember that your final draft needs to be 10% different from your rough draft. If it is not 10%, I will not accept it because that means you're just turning in the same draft twice. So I'm not asking for 2 rough drafts. I'm asking for a rough draft and a final draft. So there does need to be some changes made to your paper. So what ideally I would like to see is changes throughout the entire paper and not just like you focus on one paragraph and ignore the rest because obviously last week I told you guys I was working on my 10 to 15 page paper. I finished it on Saturday. It ended up being 13 and a half pages. I had my wife read it. She left 28 comments on it. And so I went through and I changed everything Sunday and got it turned in. Which, by the way, I just have 1 class left, and then I have to write a 25-page paper after that. But I'm almost done. So I'll be done in November with my grad school, so I'm excited about that. But there was a lot of changes that I made. So again, some of it was small changes. Some of it was just like, this was kind of unclear, or this, you kind of phrase this weird, and I don't really get what you're saying kind of thing. So a lot of your changes are just going to be that. It's not like you have to like completely rewrite your entire essay, but just look for anything that's like, this doesn't make sense, or this could be more detailed and make more sense. one of the things that I did, for example, that my wife got after me about was I kept saying they a lot, and I wasn't being specific to who I was referring to. So, just little things like that. But you're going to submit your new draft to the final essay, which I just fixed, so you should be able to do that now. So yeah. Okay, transformation. So this is going to be, again, the topic of our of the several short stories that we read. So we're going to, again, read, let's see if I can do this in order. We're going to read 7 Floors, Biafra. We're actually going to take a quick little break from there, and then we're going to read creation myths. So we're going to read different stories from different mythologies from all over the world. Again, it is world literature after all, so I want to make sure that we do that. So after our little break doing the creation myths, we'll be reading Harrison Bergeron. Then we'll read And If Clay Are We Created? Then Metamorphosis, the graphic novel. And I believe that's it, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think I'm missing anything, but I think that's pretty much it. And then after that, so that's all those stories we're going to be talking about transformation. So transformation, the reason we're going to be talking about it is because we want to see, again, how characters change, and I'm going to go into some of the things that you need to know about transformation, as well as the other words that are going to be important. So the focus of this short story unit is conflict, transformation, characterization, purpose, and then the bigger picture for all of those things, how they all work together. So for conflict, you guys know what this is. Conflict is a problem that occurs to the protagonist that they attempt to overcome. Now, why do I say that they attempt to overcome it?
Maybe they don't always overcome it.
Yeah, exactly. When you're a little kid, the hero almost always is able to overcome the problem that they're facing, right? As we get older, we know that real life is more complicated than that, and the hero doesn't always win, unfortunately. Even despite their best efforts, even though they're a really good person, we know that even though that they try, they might not always succeed. And we learn different lessons from that too. Even if they don't succeed, we could take something positive away from it. So a problem that the protagonist must attempt to overcome, and that there are 2 types of conflict. The first one is external, and another one is internal. So external means outside, internal means inside. So in and X, out and in. So internal conflict, some examples, a guilty conscience. So if you feel bad or remorseful for something that you did, you knew you did something wrong and you have to deal with that guilt. Maybe you have to feel like you have to make something right, or maybe it's something that you're trying to hide your guilty conscience. So again, it depends on the story, but that's an example of internal conflict. A difficult choice. There's no right answer, but the character has to figure out what's right for them. So an example, kind of is a cliche, but it's still an example. In movies where a person's having to choose between their career and a family. Technically, there's no right or wrong in that. It's just what's right for the person. So that's an example of, again, a difficult choice that they would have to make. Right and wrong, making the right decision versus the wrong decision. So ethical choices, if I do this, it could benefit me, but if I don't do it, it could harm other people. So having to make the right and wrong choice, figuring that out, can be an internal conflict. And mental illness. So mental illness, obviously, different types of mental illness. Some are that occur at birth, and some occur as a result of something happening to a person or a character, right? So all of these things are inside. So another way to look at this is person versus self, right? So that's who the conflict is between. It's between the person, the protagonist, and themselves. So person versus self is internal conflict. External conflict. So person versus nature, natural disasters, battling against elements, somebody's out in the cold or something and they're trying to And also that would kind of go along with survival, but trying to have to deal with it. So if you've ever seen the movie like Castaway, for example, there's no like bad guy trying to like, has anybody hadn't seen that movie Castaway or no? It's the one where the dude like, I think he crashed, it's been a long time since I've seen it, but he crashes on a plane, ends up on an island, he's by himself. He basically, the movie's him trying to survive and stuff, but there's like no enemy or anything that he has to face. His enemy is nature because he's trying to survive and trying to figure out how he can do that and how he can get back.
Is that the movie with Tom Hanks?
Yeah, it's with Tom Hanks in the volleyball.
Yeah. Oh, it's that movie.
Yeah, no, there you go, the volleyball movie. Yeah, exactly. Wilson. Person versus person, man versus man. Antagonist is enemy, competitor, or rival. So obviously you have the more extreme versions like Joker and Batman, where there's an antagonist. You also have like the more innocent ones, like my son who's in third grade is like obsessed with Pokemon, and a lot of times they don't like. Sometimes there's enemies, but a lot of times it's just like rivals or something. Like even though they don't want to like kill each other necessarily or battle each other, well, I guess they do. But has anybody ever thought about how Pokemon's kind of jacked up though? Like it's basically just like animal fighting, and it's like I don't know. It seems kind of jacked up, and it's like I don't want to say anything to my son but I realized like it seems kind of like like the like SPCA or somebody would be like or PETA would be like this isn't cool. But anyways, person versus society would be the last one. So person having to deal with like expectations of society. So it's anything that they feel is like unfair, unjust. Sometimes it's like a story like, oh, I just want to fit in with everybody else, or it could be a story I don't want to fit in with everybody else. Everybody needs to let me be who I am. So that's an example of person versus society. Older school. I mean, well, I guess it's not just old school. It happens now too. But I mean, even like people who like for example, like feminist readings of stuff. So like women who feel like that, like they're not being given a fair shake, or it even can go into race as well. So those are different options about like unjust or unfair expectations that are put on different people or groups. All right, so that was conflict. Characterization is kind of like the biography narrative you guys just did. In the introduction, you described how people look. So how do they look? But more importantly, how does it affect what we think of that person based off of their description? Now, as screwed up and jacked up as it sounds, people do judge people on their looks. It's not necessarily right, but people will make first impressions based off of looks. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like if somebody might dress up sloppily, maybe they can assume that maybe they're lazy.
Exactly.
First impressions are important too.
Yep. And even it doesn't even have to be like super sloppy, but like even if you like go in for an interview, you have a bunch of wrinkled clothes and stuff like that. Your potential employer, even though you could be like the best person for the job and a hard worker, you're just not good at ironing clothes. They could make a snap judgment based off of that. Now, the problem with the appearance thing is the people who like stick to their guns and are like, oh, well, this is how I see them, so this is how I'm going to always judge them from now on. But we have to move past appearance and get into personality too. So what is the character like? What kind of person are they? And then again, how does that affect the reader's opinion of that character? So appearance and personality. Personality is more important, but appearance does play a part into it too. And just like with conflict, where there's internal, external, there's two types of characterization, direct and indirect. So for direct, here's an example. Character X is not to be trusted. I'm directly telling you a character trait about this character. So we can't trust them. They're dishonest. They're a liar. So I'm telling you exactly what this character is like. Indirect is going to be the most common one. Again, you probably see more direct and like more like younger, like stuff written for younger audiences. Indirect though, character X left out the part that they were not qualified for the job. So for example, teachers have to have teaching credentials to teach. Okay, that's just one of the things we have to get after we get our bachelor's degree. So if I went for an interview and like they asked, or like I never mentioned the fact that I didn't have a teaching credential, then I would be leaving out something important and I'd be being dishonest about my qualifications for the job. So based on my actions, I would be viewed as being dishonest, right? So the difference is, this one, you don't have to think about anything. The narrator is telling you exactly what you need to know. This one, you have to make what's called an implication. You have to see what the author is implying about the character. They're not directly telling you it, they're hinting at like, this person's dishonest based off of their actions. You should figure that out on your own. So we're gonna see a lot of that in our readings, and where we're gonna have to kind of figure out like, okay, how would I describe this character based off what they did? And then how those two things apply to transformation. Characters change because of conflict. We change because of conflict, not just in stories, everybody does. Again, think about the pandemic. The pandemic is a massive worldwide conflict that everybody has to deal with. Nobody thought 2 years ago that we were all gonna be wearing face masks. Nobody thought that there was gonna be like battles over who had a shot, who didn't have a shot. But the world has changed around us, and it's actually caused people to change. Some people have become more aggressive as a result of the pandemic on both sides. People who are pro-vaccine, people who are anti-vaccine, have become more aggressive towards one another. Some people, because of the pandemic, have become more closed off from the world around them. They like are more hiding out in their homes, right? Some people are, even though they're not like going out and being crazy, but like people are just having to be more like cautious for the most part about, or having to like decide like weigh their options. Like, all right, if I go there, can I act normal? Do I have to like are there certain rules I have to follow? So conflict can change people, and it does change people. So in the stories that we read, we're going to see how the problems that the characters face, whether they're internal conflicts or external conflicts, how does that change their character traits? So it causes them to change because the character needs to adapt to their new reality. Again, basically it's like, has anybody heard of like does everybody know what like a multiverse is? Everybody knows what that is for the most part. Parallel universes almost. Some people believe that multiverses actually exist because every time you make a decision, it creates a new universe. I mean, I'm not sure if I believe that like literally, but I think it's an interesting idea to think about. So every time like you make a decision, it affects not only your world, but it affects other people's worlds around them too. So the problems that happen in a story causes the characters to react, to adapt to their new reality, and it forces them to create their own realities as well. The change can be positive or negative in the character. Sometimes people react in a positive way and are empowered because of the problems that they come across, and sometimes they react negatively. They don't handle it well. So obviously it'll just depend on the characters that we read about. So the big question is, why is conflict important? It's important because obviously it causes characters to change for several reasons. So stress, challenge, survival, adaptation. So those are the reasons why they change. What does it reveal about the characters, their strengths, weaknesses, motivations? Again, if we could figure out why characters and stories change, maybe we can figure out why other people change, or even just as importantly, why do we change? So it's a way to like look at the world around us as well as ourselves. So again, the bigger picture about, so the characters have transformed, who cares? So why did the author have the character change the way they did? Again, stuff doesn't fall on paper, you know? We create words. When you guys write an essay, you guys created the words. You made a choice about the words you use. The author does the same thing. So the author is intending for their character to make the changes that the author wants them to change. Okay, so we now know that. So what life message are we learning about why the character changed? So they changed, so what am I supposed to take away from that? What is it supposed to be telling me about how people are, how I am? And then finally, how can this message have an impact, again, on people? So like looking outside of the story, like we have this message, how can this help people like deal with reality? How can this help people deal with their everyday lives by learning the message from the story? So that's kind of like what's going to be important. So we're going to look at what are the problems in the stories, what are the characters like from beginning to end, because again, they might not be the same person that they were at the beginning. We're going to look at why does it matter? Why is the author telling us this? Why should I care that they changed? And what is it? What message should I be taking away from it? Okay, so again, this is going to be our first story. And through a lot of these stories, we're going to be annotating the stories. The reason why we're annotating, not because I'm trying to kill time. I promise you, I'm not just trying to do that. It's really important for you guys to learn how to do this because it is going to make your life so much easier when it comes to writing. Because when you annotate, you're going to have quotes ready to go that you're not going to have to look for. It's like, okay, time to write an essay.
I was gonna ask if I use the restroom.
Yeah, but just in a little bit, okay? So for the annotations, you guys finding quotes can sometimes be the most difficult part. Whenever, like when I did my 10 to 15 page paper last week, I found all my quotes first. So what I did is I went through the essays that we read because I left notes, and basically I found like 2 to 3. I found 3 pages worth of quotes, and just plugged them into my essay, and put them like where I was going to talk about them and stuff. Like I organized it by topic. But when we annotate, you're not going to have to go back and look for how the character transformed. You're going to have that information already on your paper. So I'm going to go ahead and pass this out. We're going to do the first page together. Why don't you actually go ahead and go while I'm passing this out, okay? I might. I'll check. I have pins. So. Wait. Welcome. Where are they at? They're right. Okay. I would say if you have highlighters, to get out a highlighter. You technically don't have to have one. I do have some if you would like some. You can also do just a squiggly line underneath if you would rather do that. That's fine. Because we're going to be underlining things, boxing things, circling things, highlighting things. But if you want to, you could also, rather than highlighting, you can just do that instead. I'm not going to be super picky about it, just as long as it's consistent. Okay. All right, so 7 Floors is about 12 pages long. We're going to be reading the first probably 2 pages today. We're going to do one together, one on your own. We'll see how far we get, but we'll continue reading it. Again, you're not going to have any other homework other than your essay if you're not done with it. So if you're done, we'll have no homework. So, yeah, you. 7 Floors is written by an Italian author. His name's Dino, not Dino, not like dinosaur, but Dino Buzzati. And basically the story is about this dude. His name's Giuseppe Corte. Actually, his name is Giovanni Corte, but Giuseppe's his nickname, so it'll switch back and forth between the words Giovanni and Giuseppe. Don't get confused, it's the same person. Just like Nicholas and Nick, same person, right? But anyways, we are in world literature, so we're not going to get too crazy in the weeds with this, but translations do affect the story. How many of you speak another language other than English? Raise your hand. Okay, those of you who do know that when you translate another language to English and vice versa, the words don't always pan out. There's a phrase called lost in translation, right? So that means that the meaning gets actually lost because there's not a perfect fit for the words, right? So there are going to be a couple of times, just like if you've ever watched a movie or a show that's in a different language, sometimes the translation can be kind of clunky and weird, like a weird phrase. We'll see that in this story, so if you see that, don't worry about it. Don't focus too much on it. But anyway, so Giovanni Corte, or Giuseppe Corte, again, same person, is in a hospital, and I don't want to like reveal too much, but basically he is sick, and we're going to kind of see how he reacts to his illness, essentially. So while we're annotating, here is what we are going to be doing. So we're going to be circling words we don't know, because there will be some words that we come across that maybe we're not familiar with, or maybe it's used in a different way that we're not used to. We're going to box words that give imagery, so that means anytime they describe the setting, so the building, the rooms, whatever, anytime they describe, like if you can imagine it in your head, that's imagery, you're going to put a box around it. You're going to underline words or phrases that show Corte's feelings. Honestly, this is the most important one because that's going to help us the most with our essays when we're ready to write it. Because we need to see what his feelings are like at the beginning versus what they're like towards the end and how they've changed over the course of the story. So it's really important every time we see basically direct or indirect characterization that we underline it so we know like, okay, this is what he was like at the beginning, this is what he's like in the middle, this is what he was like in the end, so that way we can talk about how the characters changed. And then highlighting anything that seems important. It could be foreshadowing, it could be hinting at like the theme, which the theme is just a life message. And then at the bottom of each page, you're just gonna write 1 to 2 sentences explaining what happened. And that's just for me, rather than giving you guys a quiz on the story. This is just gonna be like, okay, what happened? Just tell me what happened on that page. 1 sentence is fine, but don't write like, Giovanni did stuff, what stuff, so. Okay, so like I said, we're gonna do the first page together. So here's my sample annotation. I'm gonna read it out loud, kind of like walk and talk and think about why I marked the things I did. So here we go. First paragraph. One morning in March, after a night's train journey, Giovanni Corte arrived in the town where the famous nursing home was. He was a little feverish, but he was still determined to walk from the station to the hospital carrying his small bag. So again, I underlined the word determined. Go ahead. Sorry.
How do you use the thing for imagery again?
A box.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I pretty much annotated the first page for you, but if you see extra stuff that you want to mark down, go for it, okay? But in this paragraph, at least underline the word determined, because that's an example of what type of characterization, direct or indirect. Direct. If you said indirect, that's okay, don't worry about it, but the narrator is literally telling us what he is. He is determined. So he wants to get stuff done. So it wasn't based off of the actions, it was just the narrator telling us how he was doing something. Okay, moving on. Although his was an extremely slight case in the very earliest stages, Giovanni Corte had been advised to go to the well-known sanatorium, which existed solely for the care of the particular illness from which he was suffering. This meant that the doctors were particularly confident and the equipment particularly pertinent and efficient. Okay, so I circled a couple of words. First one, sanatorium, and then pertinent. I circled those words because I figured, well, maybe you guys don't know what those are. Sanatoriums are typically hospitals. Sometimes they deal with mental illnesses. In this case, I think this is one of those translation issues that I was talking about. Because there's no sign of like necessarily mental illnesses in this place, although you could make the argument that the main character does by the end of the story. But a sanatorium, in this case, we're just going to think of it.
Ebony Gutierrez? No stuff.
Okay. But basically, we're just going to think of it as a hospital for dealing with people with fairly severe illnesses. Now, I say fairly severe, even though he's saying it's a slight case, but we'll talk about that as we get through the story. Pertinent is like important or necessary. So like the equipment that they have was necessary for the illnesses that they're dealing with. And then I highlighted particular illness because I want you guys to know this rule that authors have in writing. It's called the smoking gun rule. Well, what does a smoking gun imply?
Because it's been fired.
It had just been fired, it just went off, right? Now, in a story, an author is not gonna have like a gun on the table unless there's a reason for it. They're not gonna mention something that they're not gonna have used, right? I mean, if they are, they're probably not very good writers. So you wouldn't say like, a gun was left on the table, you know, and then nothing ever happens with it, you know? Even if it doesn't get used, at least there's some suspense built around it that they like keep coming back to or something. But again, the fact that he's mentioning that there is a particular illness or that it exists for a particular illness, it wouldn't be there unless it was implying that the sickness is gonna matter to the character. So we know that the story is gonna revolve around this illness just because it was mentioned. Okay, let's keep going. Catching sight of it from a distance, he recognized as having from seeing photos in some brochure. Giovanni Corte was most favorably impressed. Again, I underlined it. That's an example of indirect characterization because it's basically, the fact that he's impressed doesn't necessarily mean, like it's not describing who he is as a person, but it's hinting that he could be more of a positive person, right? He's favorably impressed. He's like, oh, that's really cool. So like, maybe he's appreciative, maybe he's optimistic. So those are just like different guesses that we could form based off what the author said about him. The building was white, 7 stories high. Its mass was broken up by a series of recesses, which gave it a vague resemblance to a hotel. It was surrounded by tall trees. A recess is anything that's just inside something else. So like, for example, this window, they're recessed into the wall. So the hospital is big, giant white building, lots of windows, kind of looks like a hotel, very uniform looking. And then it has a bunch of tall trees around the bottom of it. Following a brief medical visit, the preliminary to a more accurate and complete examination, Giuseppe Corte was put in a cheerful room on the 7th floor on the 7th and uppermost floor. The furniture and upholstery were bright and shining like a wallpaper. The armchairs were made of wood. The pillows covered with multicolored fabrics, and the view from the window swept out over one of the most beautiful areas of the city. Everything was peaceful, hospitable, and reassuring. Giuseppe Corte put himself right to bed, turned on the overhead light, and began to read a book he had brought with him. Shortly, the nurse came in to inquire if there was anything he needed. Again, a little bit of a typo there. Anything he needed, anything, but that's fine. Anyways, okay. So I squared off here. Because this was describing the outside of the building. Now there's a description of the inside of the building on the 7th floor. So the 7th floor is happy, cheerful, bright colors, the sort of thing that you would have in a more like optimistic kind of space. It's like, oh, everything's so cheerful here, brightly colored, it's not boring and white. Here's some words that I circled that you might not know. Preliminary means first. So the first examination that he had. Hospitable means like welcoming and giving. And to inquire about something is to ask. All right, we got about 10 minutes. So I want to make sure we get through this. Giuseppe Corte didn't need anything, but he began to chat freely with the young woman, asking for information about the clinic. In this way, he learned about the hospital's unique practice of assigning its patients to different floors in accordance with the gravity of their illness. On the 7th floor, the top floor, only the very mildest cases were treated. Those whose form of the illness were grave, but who certainly couldn't be neglected, weren't grave, but who certainly couldn't be neglected, were assigned to the 6th floor. More serious infections were treated on the 5th floor, and so on and so forth. Gravely ill patients were housed on the second floor, and on the first floor, those for whom all hope had been abandoned. Okay? So gravity, grave, the gravity, not like this kind of gravity like the severity or seriousness of something. So again, a word that we're used to saying but used a little differently. Again, it wasn't grave, not like the grave that like you get buried in, but again, it weren't serious. Giuseppe Corte didn't need anything. What does that say about him, do you think?
He's curious.
Okay, what else?
Independent.
Independent? What else?
Reassured.
What's that?
More like he's reassured.
More like-
nothing will happen.
Okay. Yeah, so reassured, independent. Yeah, so you say he's content, he's happy, he's fine, he doesn't, so like it just shows that like he doesn't need a lot of attention right now, right? So that's something that we're learning about him. Now this highlighted part, again, the smoking gun rule. The fact that they're mentioning the other floors and what happens on them is implying that he's probably going to go visit those floors at some point. So the fact that he mentioned it means that it's probably going to happen, or else why would he mention it? Not only did this unique system speed up service, it made it unlikely that mildly ill patients would be upset by the unnecessary proximity of other patients who might be suffering agonies, and it guaranteed a homogeneous atmosphere on every floor. In addition, treatment could be perfectly graded to offer their best possible results. Okay, I struggled with agonies, although most people in my last class knew what that meant. It means like pain and stuff like that, But homogeneous, most people did not know. Homogeneous means the same. So things that like look the same, that appear the same. These Post-it notes are all homogeneous. They're the same color, they're the same shape, size. If they were different colors, they would not be homogeneous because they would be different. And then the last paragraph, each floor was like a small self-contained world with its own particular rules and special traditions that had no validity on other floors. And since each ward was under the direction of a different doctor, there were precise differences, some absolutely minimal, in methods of treatment. This despite the fact that the institution's general director had engraved a single address on the building. So each floor, 7 floors, is its own world. They each have their own rules by which they operate, a different doctor that makes its own policies, its own traditions, but yet it's all in the same building. It all has the same address. Could be a metaphor for real life. Even though we're all at Sanger High School, we all have different rules from which we come from. We have different experiences, different rules that apply to us in some ways, based off of what our parents have told us. Some people who've gotten in trouble from at school who might have to have more strict rules put upon them. So it could be a metaphor for real life, the fact that we're all from the same place, but yet we all have different rules or different realities and stuff like that. So just something to think about. But anyway, so the last thing I need you guys to really do today, because we only have about 5 minutes left? Oh, we have 7. So I'll let you guys pack up in about 3 or 4 minutes. So what I want you guys to do right now is write the summary on the bottom, so 1 to 2 sentences about what you just read. And then if there's still a few minutes, go on to the next page, start reading a little bit.